All right, so we've got a whole pile of reviews and buzz about this movie, The Wild Robot.
Should we just dive right in?
Yeah.
I think so. I think it's time for a deep dive to unpack this movie because it's
kind of taken everybody by surprise, and people are already saying it could change animation as we know it.
yeah, it's definitely got people talking a lot to unpack here. We've got like the perfect Rotten Tomatoes score, whispers of like a potential DreamWorks renaissance.
A renaissance. Whoa, now, that's a pretty bold claim, don't you think? You got to back that up.
It's a bold claim. I think the evidence is there.
All right, let's start with this whole perfect Rotten Tomatoes score thing. 100%.
Right.
You never see that, especially with DreamWorks.
It's unheard of, really. It's an incredible way to start. 25 critics all on board, and everyone's raving about it. Even if the score drops a little bit, it's still a massive achievement.
Okay, so the critics, they love it, but what about the rest of us? What's got everyone so charmed by this robot story?
Well, you can't ignore the director, Chris Sanders. I mean, this isn't just some animation director. This is one of the minds behind How to Train Your Dragon.
Oh, yeah. No, that's a big deal.
That's a trilogy that constantly ranks as one of DreamWorks' best.
And How to Train Your Dragon. Talk about breaking the mold, right? I mean, the animation was beautiful. The story was compelling. So much emotion.
Absolutely.
Don't even get me started on those soundtracks.
Oh, good. And what's interesting is Sanders has this really distinctive animation style, this kind of hand-drawn feel, but it blends seamlessly with CGI, and it just brings so much warmth and like expressiveness to the characters, you know?
I'm really interested to see how he approaches this story about a robot finding her place. It's a different kind of connection than How to Train Your Dragon, right? A different family dynamic.
Yeah, definitely. And that's where the source material comes in, right? Because The Wild Robot is based on this beloved children's book.
Oh, that's right.
So it's got this really strong narrative foundation, and that's so crucial for any adaptation.
You know, what's interesting to me is that DreamWorks, they don't always have the best track record with these original films.
Yeah.
They've had some wins, but they've also had a couple of, let's just call them learning experiences.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, DreamWorks is pretty much synonymous with like franchises, right? Shrek, Kung Fu Panda, Madagascar. I mean, the list goes on and on. But when it comes to these original stories, it's a real mixed bag, you know?
So you've got this legacy of sequels, right?
Yeah.
All these franchises, and then The Wild Robot just kind of drops out of nowhere with a perfect score. What kind of message do you think that sends to a studio like DreamWorks?
Well, it's got to be a big deal, right? I mean, in this world of like sequels and reboots, you've got a movie like this, a totally original story, and it gets this amazing critical reception. It could be a sign that audiences are really craving something new and different.
I know I am.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I love a good franchise as much as anybody, but there's something really exciting about a brand new story. Like it's saying, hey, you don't need a familiar name to get us interested. Just tell us a good story and tell it well.
Yeah, exactly. And for a studio like DreamWorks, this could be a really important moment. They've been trying to break away from just franchises for a while now. Remember The Bad Guys? That was a couple years ago. Amazing animation. But it didn't really land with critics the same way The Wild Robot has.
Okay, so if this is their chance to do something different with original content, where do they go from here? What can they take away from the good, and let's face it, the not so good, to make sure this isn't just a one-time thing?
That is the question, isn't it? And it's a tough one. If you look back at what they've done, DreamWorks has definitely tried original stories. Rise of the Guardians, for example.
Yeah.
What an interesting movie.
Yeah.
Really visually impressive, a totally new idea, but it didn't really grab people the way they hoped.
I remember that one.
Yeah.
I think they were going for this whole new holiday mythology thing, which was really ambitious.
Yeah.
Maybe a little too out there for most people.
Yeah, that's possible. And it's a tough line for DreamWorks to walk, right? You've got to be original, but also appeal to a lot of people. And that's what's really interesting about The Wild Robot. It feels familiar, but also unique. It's got those themes of family, belonging, finding where you fit in that everyone can relate to, but you're seeing them through the eyes of a robot who's trying to figure out life in the wilderness.
Yeah, I can see that. So we've got this amazing director, a book that everyone seems to love, and a studio that might be entering a new creative phase. But let's go back to those Rotten Tomatoes scores for a minute. 100% is incredible, but how does it compare to other DreamWorks movies?
Well, put it this way. Out of all their films, only 8 have gotten a 90% or higher on Rotten Tomatoes. And right now, The Wild Robot is at the very top.
Wow, 8 movies. That's a pretty small group.
Uh-huh.
So what you're saying is this isn't just another successful DreamWorks movie. This could be one of their best ever.
Yeah, it really could be. We might be seeing a big shift in animation where an original story not only gets noticed by critics, but also leads to studios taking more creative risks.
I love that idea. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We've seen critically acclaimed movies totally flop at the box office.
That's true, you're right. Just because the critics love it doesn't mean the box office will follow. So what do you think? Does The Wild Robot have that special something to really connect with audiences on a big scale?
I mean, that's the question, right? And we can't answer it just by looking at numbers and scores.
Right.
But we can look for those little things, the ones that make a movie more than just a movie.
Okay, what kind of little things are we talking about here?
Well, think about the animated movies that people still love years later. They usually have that extra something everyone can connect with, something that makes you talk about it, see things differently, something that stays with you.
You mean the ones that become part of our culture? Exactly. And it's too early to say if that will happen with The Wild Robot, but it definitely has the potential. The story is all about those timeless themes.
Yeah.
Finding where you belong, the importance of connection, our responsibility to nature. But it explores them in this really unique and interesting way.
A robot finding her place in the wild. It's a new perspective on those familiar themes. And you said before that the book is really popular. Have you read it yourself? What did you think?
I actually finished it super quickly. It's such a well-written story, and it manages to be both heartwarming and make you think, and it seems like the filmmakers captured that feeling perfectly. The early reviews all mention how emotional it is, how it makes you think about family, technology, the environment.
So it's more than just a robot adventure story. It can actually make a difference for people. Imagine families leaving the theater, not just entertained, but actually wanting to learn about robotics or think differently about how we treat the planet. That's the kind of impact that goes beyond just watching a movie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what makes The Wild Robot so interesting. It shows how powerful an original story can be. It could change animation for the better, encouraging studios to take more chances, bring in different voices, tell stories that matter.
Those are some big shoes to fill. But based on everything we've talked about today, it sounds like The Wild Robot might actually pull it off.
It's a story that's relevant today and will be relevant for years to come. It's entertaining, but makes you think, too. I'm really excited to see how it all plays out. And to our listener out there, definitely check it out. The Wild Robot might just surprise you.
You've convinced us. Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into The Wild Robot. We'll be back next week with a whole new topic. So until then, enjoy the show.